everyone! So today I thought that I would talk about all of the books that I read last semester that had to do with autism. So autism and people with disabilities have always been a very important topic to me. I've been working with special ed kids for years, and I also do plan on studying it in college. Last semester I took a class really focusing on how autism is represented in literary and film, and we had to read 9 books for this class, but all of these books I feel like I need to talk about, even if not all of them, in my opinion, were the best way to represent autism. I really hope that this video helps anyone who wants to learn more about autism and wants to read a good book that has a good representation of autism, or on the flip side, one that doesn't have a great representation. Just a really quick disclaimer before I get into the books: everything that I talk about in this video, including my opinions on how I feel autism is represented, is my own opinion, so please respect that. So the first book that I read in this class was Autism by Stuart Murphy. This is a nonfiction book that seeks to understand autism by combining medical, historical, and cultural approaches. It is written in this really well-rounded view on autism in mind, and it speaks to how autism is viewed all around the world. This book was really educational, and it really does provide a really great history as to how autism was viewed back then when we didn't really know much about it. It also, as you can see, it's a really quick read, and I thought that this book had a slight personal spin on it because the author's son is autistic. The next book that I want to talk about today is Loud Hands. This is written by Julia Bascom and a bunch of other autistic authors. This is an anthology of short essays. This was a project that was created by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network in an effort to give autistic people a voice and to help spread awareness in society. I thought that all the essays in this book were written really well, and it was one of those books where you really are kept engaged in it because there are so many essays. There's an essay like every couple pages in this book. You can see I've actually bookmarked a lot of them because these were the main ones that we were focusing on in class. So every couple essays you would get like this new story and this new perspective, and this book was written by a variety of people on the spectrum. So you would have someone who was nonverbal, then maybe you would have someone that had Asperger's. So you really got a well-rounded viewpoint on autism. The authors also really allow you to be in their shoes and really help you picture like what it was like for them and how their experiences actually were. So the next book that I want to talk about is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. I talked about this book in a couple other videos before. This is a fiction book about an autistic boy named Christopher. He is 15 years old, and he is a very, very smart kid. He is particularly interested in math and science. And then one day his neighbor's dog gets murdered, and Christopher sets out on a mission to figure out who killed the dog. However, along the way he discovers much more than he originally set out to discover. This book was one of my favorite books last year, and it completely took me by surprise because as much as I liked a majority amount of the books on this list, this one was definitely the ultimate favorite, and I could read this one over and over again. The representation of autism in this book was really, really great. I thought that it was really well done, and it really feels like the reader is in Christopher's shoes, because you can see in this book Christopher is like the one writing it. Although it's never specifically said, I do believe that Christopher has Asperger's, since he demonstrates many qualities of that condition. He's very interested in math and science, which could be his specific topic that he is interested in. He is very socially awkward, and he is sensitive to touching and sound. All of these are common traits in people with Asperger's. I also really loved Christopher's relationship with all the people in this book. Even though he doesn't really like touching and doesn't like when people hug him, I loved how he and his dad kind of came up with this system where you put your hands together lightly and that's like the form of a hug. I thought that was really great on his dad's part for understanding that this is how his son is, and that's okay. He still loves him anyway, and he's just going to modify to this as a hug instead of like the traditional hug. So the next book I want to talk about is a memoir, and it is I Overcame My Autism and All I Got Was This Lousy Anxiety Disorder by Sarah Kerchak. This is a memoir about the author's own experiences growing up with autism, specifically Asperger's, and trying to hide it when she was a child. This was so she could be normal and better fit in with her peers. She also talks about how she was not diagnosed with autism until she was 27. This is actually very common, as females are 4 times more likely to go undiagnosed with autism as a child than males are. This book also further discusses how constantly trying to hide her autism just made her have this constant anxiety instead. I thought that this book did a really good job bringing to life all the struggles that come from hiding your autism, and you could really see that if people found out, then this could really make her life much harder. This was also, I believe, the first full-length book that we read where the author was actually autistic. Obviously, we read Loud Hands, but that was just a bunch of short essays, so it really provided this really inner experience, and it really allowed me to get this more authentic view on how autism is represented in books and media. I also really loved the transparentness that Kerchak has in this book. It really made her experiences feel much more real, really made me feel like I was in her shoes. The next book that I want to discuss is Love That Boy by Ron Fournier. This is another memoir, and it is written by a parent who tells the story about how he got to know his autistic child and learn to accept him for who he is rather than who he wanted him to be. They do this by going on 8 father-son road trips, and throughout the book you see each one of these road trips and the effect that it had on him. This book also really dives into how a lot of parents have this expectation for a normal parent-child relationship before their child is born, so therefore whenever their child is born autistic, instead of accepting that child, they end up grieving the child that they never had. And it shows how those expectations can be pretty damaging in a relationship. All in all, I thought this book was pretty good, and I really thought it did a great job documenting the journey that he took. I feel like he really grew as the book went on. I also thought it provided really good insight on how parents feel after their child is diagnosed with autism. This book also had a really interesting format where the first part of every chapter was the actual road trip and him recounting it, and then the part after that, the rest of the chapter was just him talking about what he learned from it. So the first part was written in italics, so you always knew whenever it switched over from the actual road trip to him reflecting and talking about what he learned. Next book that I want to talk about is Fall Down 7 Times, Get Up 8 by Naomi Higashida. This is the book without the dust jacket because this is a used copy, so I don't own the dust jacket. This is a memoir written by a nonverbal author who shares his thoughts on how life is like and how everyday life is like with his severe autism. He discusses his memories of school, his relationship with his family, and his struggles he has had throughout his life with communication. Throughout the book, he hopes to have more people in society understand that people with disabilities are people and are not problems because of their disabilities. The thing about this book that I really loved was that it really allowed you to understand just how difficult some things are. One of my favorite parts of the book was he was going through his process of what it was like for him to just pick a flower off the ground, and it was this constant 8-step thing in his mind, and it's really hard to recount. I just recommend reading it, and he would just go through how difficult just that little motion was, but how he was ultimately able to do it. It just took many more steps than a neurotypical would have. I also loved his connection with his family and how he always felt the most comfortable being around them. This was also such a fast and easy read, and I was really kept engaged the whole time reading it. This book is written almost in a verse type way. It's not verse, but it was almost written like that, and it was just so easy to read. So I really recommend if you want to read a book about a nonverbal autistic, but don't feel like you have a lot of time to, this is a really great book because it really is just such an easy read. The next book I want to talk about is How to Be a Sister by Aline Garvin. This is a memoir about 2 sisters reconnecting when they are grown adults, one of them having severe autism. Garvin retells the story about how she attempted to connect with her older sister Margaret, the one who has autism, and battles the question of what role she will ultimately end up playing in her sister's life. So I'll be honest, this was one of my least favorite books that we read in this class. For the majority of the book, it was just Garvin lamenting over how she wishes her sister was born without autism, and I really feel like she did this more than actually learning to connect with her in a way that they would both be able to connect. Because the thing about autism is that you can't connect with them the way that you connect with many other people. You have to connect to them on their level. You have to connect to them in a way that they understand. And Garvin did not really do that in this book, and it was very clear that she just wanted her to be normal. I also really felt like Garvin viewed autism as a barrier or something that was blocking her sister's true self, when in reality we know that that is not the case, and that autism is a part of someone and not blocking them from showing their full authentic self. I feel like she also viewed autism as something that can be cured, and again, we know that that is not the case. I will say that I do feel like she grew a little bit towards the end, and I do get that it must be really hard to try to form a relationship with someone, especially someone who has severe autism like Margaret does. But most of the book really in the end was just her complaining about Margaret and just not really putting that effort into actually having a genuine relationship with her sister, and that really just made me upset when I was reading this book. So the next book I want to talk about is The Secret Life of a Black Aspie by Anand Prahlad. This is a memoir written by an autistic author. So Prahlad does not speak until the age of 4 and does not get diagnosed with autism until he is 57. He talks a lot about how he is able to talk to more than just people, so like objects and the spirits of dead slave children. This book also focuses on the connection between racism and autism and how this has affected Prahlad throughout his whole life. I was pretty confused a lot of the time about how he was able to talk to the spirits, and he did make it very clear in this book though that he was not making this up, nor was it a metaphor. I really thought that this book could have focused a little bit more on autism. Autism definitely took a back seat at times, although I do understand that part of the reason why it was not front and center was, as I was saying earlier, he was not diagnosed until he was 57, this being extremely late in life for someone who is typically diagnosed with autism, and he was born in the 1950s, so no one really knew what autism was at this time. Overall though, I will say this was a pretty interesting read, and I did thoroughly enjoy it, although I will also admit that I was just so tired at this point in the class, because this was like the 5th memoir that we had read in like a 4-week time, and like it was just getting exhausting. The last book I want to talk about is the Kiss Quotient by Helen Hong. This is an adult romance novel about a girl named Stella who has Asperger's. She does not feel very comfortable being in relationships, although because she's in her 30s now, her mother wants her to find someone and settle down. So in order to do this, she hires someone to help her learn how to be in a relationship. So right off the bat, I did not love this one because it is an adult romance novel, which is really not my thing. I read YA. I also thought that autism could have played a bigger role in this book. Similar to what I was saying in the last one, I felt like it kind of took a back seat at times. It was always kind of there, although you can tell that Stella was definitely getting over some of her lifelong struggles pretty easily by the time you got to the middle of the book. On a positive note though, I did love some of the side characters, and I loved how they all accepted Stella right away without question, which is something that you don't see in a lot of books about people that have autism. You kind of see this like internal fear of, oh no, how will they react if I find out that I have this condition? And you actually see Stella go through that in the book. You see her have this like internal feeling of, oh no, if the guy that she's clearly dating in this book finds out that I have autism, how is he going to react? So I did like that struggle, and I liked how some of the side characters, when they eventually did find out, they were completely accepting of her. So those are all the books that I wanted to talk about. I hope this video helped you learn a little bit more about autism and what to read if you're curious in picking up a book about this. Autism is still something that we really don't know a ton about, so any book is really a great way to get more insight into what society knows and what they don't know. Thank you so much for watching this, and I will see you next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye!